This is Aaron Turner from Sumac and Hydra Head Records, and you are listening to the New Scene Podcast.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the New Scene. I am your host, Keith, and we're back with another brand new episode, and we've got another excellent one for you this week. We have Steve Von Til, one of the most prolific people to come out of our scene. Neurosis, Tribes of Neurot, his solo records, his record label, Neurot Recordings. I mean, Steve has done an incredible amount over the years, and he's still making a lot of great music. His project, Harvestman, is in the middle of a 3-album cycle called the Triptych series. And each album in that cycle is being released during a different moon phase this fall. Part 2 just came out. Part 3 is coming out next month in October. And listen, this conversation covers everything. Steve is a really, really interesting person, and that's coming up shortly. But first, I'm going to ask you for Apple Podcast reviews. We need them still. We're at 251. We've got to get to 300. So if you listen to this show and enjoy it, open up the podcast app on your iPhone, search The New Scene, scroll down a bit, and hit that 5-star button. You can also write a review, which I'll read at the end of the show if you leave a review. You can also follow us on Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok at New Scene Pod. And don't forget to support Iodine Recordings. Iodine has partnered with Sell the Heart Records to bring you the Fest 22 compilation, and that's benefiting Feed the Scene. So pick it up because it's supporting a good cause. We've also got a ton of great music on here from Candy Hearts, Crossed Keys, Best X, Rebuilder, The Dopamines, The Raging Nathans, and more. The 20th anniversary edition of Lady Melody by Audio Karate is up now for pre-order on limited colored vinyl. It's been completely remastered for vinyl by Jason Livermore at Blasting Room Studios. Love Letter, Everyone Wants Something Beautiful, the second pressing, is available right now. And don't forget, Iodine Recordings will be a sponsor at Furnace Fest this year. Stretch Armstrong are playing. Further Seems Forever are playing the kickoff party on Thursday night, which I believe is sold out. So if you're going to that, it's going to be a good time. The Iron Roses have 2 tour dates coming up this week with the Dead Kennedys, 9/11 in Atlanta, Georgia, and 9/12 in Pensacola, Florida. Make sure you sign up for the Iodine newsletter. You'll find out about everything first. You can sign up at iodinerecordings.com, and make sure you follow them on Instagram at Iodine Recordings. Also, don't forget to support our sponsor for the month of September, Persistent Vision Records. Persistent Vision is an independent DIY label based out of Richmond, Virginia, and they're home to a ton of great bands. Respire, Prisoner, Farn, Page 99, I mean the list goes on and on. So listen, next week, Dark Days, Bright Nights, the Persistent Vision Curated Fest is taking place. That's September 13th through 15th in Richmond, Virginia. Listen to this lineup: Young Widows, Pygmy Lush, Soul Glow, Thou, Kowloon Walled City, Glassing, Goetia, Abak, Page 99, Portrayal of Guilt, Rid of Me just got added. Rid of Me, you've got to go see them. Prisoner, have you heard the latest record from Prisoner? Putrid, Obsolete. It's brutal, it's insane, it's amazing. So you've got to go to this fest. Again, that's September 13th through 15th at the Broadberry in Richmond, Virginia. Friday passes are $30, Saturday passes $45, Sunday passes $45, and it's $115 for a weekend pass. Unbeatable lineup, a ton of must-see bands. Go. You have to. Also, we've got some new releases and reissues. We've got Repercussions of the Self from Farn. We've got An Exit Exists, the new LP from Blind Girls. We have Il N'y a Pas de Orchestre, and a collection of splits and EPs from 2004 to 2015 from Rain. Visit persistentvisionrecords.com or deathwishinc.com for records and merch. And make sure you follow the label on Instagram at Persistent Vision Records. Okay, so make sure you check back in with me. In segment 3, we'll do a wrap-up of the conversation with Steve. I'll check in and tell you what's going on with me. But right now, we are going to speak to Steve Von Till of Neurosis and Harvestman. Enjoy. All right, we are here now with Steve Von Till. Steve, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Keith.
Steve, it's great to have you here. You've done it all. You're doing it all. Harvestman has a series of LPs coming out right now. Triptych Part 2 just came out. You've got your solo career. We've got Neurosis, Tribes of Neuro. You're a poet, a father, a husband, an educator. Steve, I think you've done everything there is to do. And look, we're going to talk about all of that. But first, I want to ask you, how are you doing today?
Today I'm doing really well. Yeah. I've done some creative things. I'm on my summer break from school, so I'm on kind of night owl mode and sleeping in a little bit, waking up, reading some poetry with my coffee, walking the dogs leisurely, and then taking care of business. You know, it's never boring around here. I've set myself up with a lot of things to be responsible for, but it's great, man. Always a reason to be grateful and have gratitude for all of the things.
I like that. That sounds nice. You're living in northern Idaho?
Yeah. We live on 12 acres of forest out here north of Coeur d'Alene, and it's a beautiful area of the country.
When did you move out there, and how did you decide on Idaho?
This is my 19th year here. And really, when I first got my teaching job in California, when my first daughter was born, I was living in the Mission District in San Francisco. And as a young man in my early 20s, I loved San Francisco. I loved living in that environment. As far as like all the bars I liked, all the restaurants I liked, the record stores, everything was in walking distance, you know, and it was an easy BART ride over to the East Bay for band practice and what have you. But as time went on, I always felt a calling to nature, and always had the thought, if life turned out differently, I would live in a cabin in the woods. And over time, I realized that none of my decisions had to be mutually exclusive. And after my first daughter was born, everything I liked about the city kind of just evaporated, and I could only see the filth and the humanity. And so I quickly kind of came up with a plan to get out somewhere. And it took 5 years of developing a new career and getting vested and searching and looking. And I looked all through Oregon and Washington. And honestly, for a young family where the main income is from a independent psychedelic freaky record label and a public education, we were priced out of most places, you know. And I didn't know much about Idaho. I only heard horrible things about the type of bullshit people in politics went on here. But I did remember when a friend of mine said, "No, you should really consider checking it out." You know, like, are you moving someplace for the people, or are you moving someplace for the land? And I said, well, really, it's the landscapes and the weather. I want all 4 seasons. And he's like, you should check North Idaho out. And I remembered driving through here in a van tour early on in Neurosis's touring, where I had the pre-dawn to morning drive from Missoula, Montana to Seattle. And coming across that 4th of July pass in the Rockies and coming down upon Lake Coeur d'Alene is incredibly beautiful. It looks like you're in the fjords of Norway, you know, and it was winter as well. So it was covered in snow and really pretty. And basically it came down to, you know, here I got 12 acres of trees and a beautiful house and a shop to run the label out of, a barn, and, you know, for cheaper than I was renting in California. Is really what it came down to. And it also came down to where I could find a job. So everything kind of fell in place. And when situations present themselves like that to me, I tend to kind of go with it.
I like that. You still teach, right?
Yeah, it's 25 years.
What grade are you teaching and what do you teach?
I teach fourth grade, so that means I teach everything.
Ah, so you're just like the teacher. You teach all the subjects.
Yep, reading, writing, math, history, science.
I like that. I went to Catholic school, so we'd have the teacher who taught all of the subjects, and then we'd have a nun who would teach the religion class. And, well, they did other stuff too, computer class. I can't remember what else. Yeah, so you said you always felt this calling to nature, but I guess you lived in San Francisco or Oakland most of the time, right? Was that because of music?
Yeah, I actually never lived in Oakland. I lived in San Jose, which is in the south part of the Bay Area there. It's where I was raised. Then in my early 20s, I moved to San Francisco for about 7 years. And then back to San Jose just while I gathered my plan for getting out. Because living in the Mission District with small kids and not having a parking space and all that kind of stuff started to really drain on me.
Right. Understandably so. Have you been out there lately? It's pretty wild.
I don't even recognize it when I go there.
Yeah. I went there. When was the last time I was there? One of the last times I was there was in 2015 for a work trip. And even then I was surprised by how out in the open everything is. Because here in New York City, I'm in Brooklyn. I don't know, certain things are still kind of hidden. But when I went to San Fran, everything was just out in the open. There was guys like selling drugs right out front of City Hall and people with needles everywhere. And I was like, wow, it's different here. I like it though.
I mean, the grungy parts weren't, I mean, I think in all the major cities, the open homeless problem is growing and catastrophic and heartbreaking. But honestly, it was the gentrification that blew my mind. You had this whole kind of high tech, we call it tech bro. This tech bro culture kind of kicked out the underground art. You know, when I first moved there, it was kind of when work live lofts wasn't something that real estate agents sold. It was something that people did out of necessity. You know, you wanted an art space and an art gallery and maybe a performance space or a concert space or a welding space to do your welding art, and you needed a place to live cheap. So you'd lease out these warehouses or storefronts or old mechanic shops, and there was a lot of really unique, interesting stuff going on there in the cheaper neighborhoods where art, music, and underground culture were flourishing. You know, and I think that was probably the tail end of it. You know, because I started to see the money come in right there at the late 90s. And from what I hear, it's only gotten worse and everybody got pushed out. So,
yeah, I hear the whole downtown is like boarded up and no one is there. Last times I was there was in the heavy thick of the tech bro culture. They had already come in and swept through everything.
Oh, wow. Yeah. So anyway, cities do what cities do.
That's right.
I like to visit and get out.
So I'm curious about your intro. I know you started playing in high school, and I've heard you say that things changed for you in terms of your interest for music when you discovered punk, but what kind of bands turned you onto it?
Yeah, so I my first records I was buying myself in the mid 70s and I got into listening to rock music pretty young. You know, I was buying records at 8 and 9 years old. Really big into AC/DC and Kiss, of course, even though musically I can't relate to it anymore, but the pictures were fun and but I really loved hard rock, you know, Deep Purple, Jimi Hendrix, that kind of stuff. And that naturally led to kind of heavy metal as there was in the mainstream, you know, like Judas Priest, Iron Maiden came along right at the right time when I was, 11 years old, and was just kind of always looking for the heaviest thing I could find. And I didn't know about underground music at all. Was this kind of like arena level stuff, and then just by being always going to record stores, I started learning about underground underground metal, and that there were clubs that were I was not old enough to go to these, but that there were small bands that were not arena bands. And so I was riding that kind of American wave of that eventually turned into kind of that first wave of thrash metal, Metallica's first record in 83, and that whole when they moved up to the Bay Area where we were, and the local bands like Exodus and whatnot. And there was a big kind of crossover happening. Like at the same time I was discovering that, I was meeting friends who were listening to punk, and it all happened really quick. I think the first probably few bands I listened to were probably Fear and Minor Threat, and Discharge was a big one for me. That was a nice gateway because they had huge guitar tones, which I was always attracted to, obviously. And so I really just kind of dove into all of it. And that really quickly led to discovering that these were concerts happening in our town, being put on by other kids a little bit older than us. And that, we didn't need to be 21 and over to get into these kind of these punk shows. They were all ages shows being put on all over the place in, VFW halls or rented spaces. Which led to further underground backyard parties, house shows, and then getting a driver's license and being able to go to San Francisco and Berkeley and Oakland for all of that. And so really quickly, I was really immersed into tape trading culture all over the world, with other fans, because you couldn't get on the internet and find what the hardcore bands were in Sweden, or what was going on in France or Poland.
Right.
You had to put pen to paper and mail a tape of what's going on in your town to somebody else, and they would send you one back. And magazines like Maximum Rock and Roll were great for having scene reports from all over the world and addresses and people to write to. I did a lot of record buying, through the mail. Put $7 well concealed in an envelope, send it off and hope for the best. And a couple months later, lo and behold, you get the record in the mail. And it was really exciting, just discovering this kind of underground that immediately you're not just a fan of, but you're a participant in, and I really instantly wanted to do all of the things. Some friends and I started a fanzine. We started to put on shows in our areas at our houses, and we started bands. Eventually I wanted to start a record label, which eventually I did. And it all just kind of snowballed. Like if I take what happened between the ages of and it's probably the same for anybody in whatever they do in life, but it seems like what happened between the ages of 15 and 22 was insane. Even between age 15 and 17, life had changed. Between 15 and 19, it went from being like excited about this new thing and getting a driving permit and, being able to travel around, see things. And then I'm 19 years old and I'm in a van across the country on tour with a band, So it was, I just loved the fact that it was open-minded. It wasn't a category back then. Punk was never a style of music. It was synonymous with fuck you. We do what we want. Do it yourself. What I took out of it was give everything, expect nothing, create culture, and later on it turned out that all scenes in some ways, or it seemed to put blinders on and became kind of stylized, and you no longer had, back in the day, you'd have a bill that could be Green Day and Neurosis and a 77 style punk band and a rockabilly type punk band and a crossover band, and a performance artist. And that wouldn't be weird, and now things seem to be kind of putting like with like, which is far less interesting.
I always say this. I want to bring back the mixed bill. I'm going to try to do it. I don't know if I'm going to succeed, but I'm going to try. I like those old flyers you see where it'll be like Snapcase, Texas is the Reason, and like, I don't know, some other band that just, you wouldn't see them all together on the same show today.
100%. Yeah. It's, like, I'd much rather play a pop festival than a metal festival in a lot of ways, just because it's going to be a variety of things, you know?
Right.
Yeah.
And a variety of people. Like, I mean, why wouldn't you want to open yourself up to a new audience? And for me, as an older person, I don't go to as many shows as I used to. So this would be a great way to check out a lot of things in one show.
I agree. And plus you never, if you do something that's outside the box anyway, and doesn't, I mean, we've always felt like we were outsiders, you know, we don't fit in anywhere. We became, I don't know, you know, we never fit in, right? We're always kind of our own thing. And so you never know where you might find somebody that didn't know they were looking for your music, you know, somebody just walking by, you know, and then it hits them and they didn't see it coming, or they went to see the other band, or they, you know, and they had no idea. We've gotten, I think, a lot of our fans that way and supporters that way, just by putting ourselves out there in strange places. And, yeah, you know, letting people be moved by it as they need to be moved by it when they need to be moved by it.
Right. So during those formative years, when you're finding this music and doing all of these things, what was your life like? Did you have a specific plan, like I'm going to go to college, or I'm going to do this, or I'm going to do that? Or were you solely focused on music?
It was always I knew I was going to go to college because that was just an expectation in my family. I didn't have a plan for a career. I didn't have a plan to go get a degree in anything that would lead to a career. I just, really to please my family, I went to school, and I'm glad I did, because that, I think again, I went to college when it was still kind of, a sought after, you know, and it wasn't so expensive to go to college, and you could still get a kind of liberal arts education where you take classes in all sorts of things, and you meet, you know, you're on a campus with 25,000 other young people, some of which are doing interesting things, you know, and you've got college radio, you've got, people from the environmental studies programs that are out there, you know, educating people on things. You had the music department, you know, where I crashed some courses in recording and electronics, and even just being in that library, I would meet another music fan. You know, we'd sit up there and trade tapes and read Maximum Rock and Roll and talk about shows we were going to go to on the weekend in the library at school, where, you know, getting some work done, and just roaming the halls of that library is where I taught myself about poetry and about avant-garde music. And, you know, they had a huge vinyl collection, and I would, when we first started getting keyboards and samples, I would sit there in their, you know, they had sound effects records of speeches, records of war, records of industry, records of abstract things. And I would record these all onto cassette, which we would later move over to the sampler. And they had a video editing suite in the tech room, and I volunteered to be a person who would show up to classes and put the 16 millimeter film on at the back of the room and show the film for a few bucks, but also just for access to that video room so that I could make our disturbing psychedelic video cut-ups, which we would also convert to 16 millimeter and project behind us back then. So it was really kind of like I saw it as a resource that I could use to educate myself and use for the benefit of the art and the music. So, and yeah, it opened my eyes to a lot of things. I met people, you know, really involved in indigenous issues around the country, and which I was not really aware of, and other political stances of the underserved communities. And, you know, being a middle-class white male, you know, that was eye-opening, and I'm extremely grateful for receiving that education, you know. And same with the environmental study stuff, you know. It's it really, I think I got the benefits out of an education that you would want, you know, that I don't think my kids got that. I think college had changed significantly as it became more expensive, and you know, it seems to be more like funneling an extension of high school towards job training, but
right,
overpriced.
Right. Yeah, I like that you're utilizing all of those resources that young. That's good. I wish I would have done that. But listen, I got there eventually. So how old are you? Okay, so you're in college. You joined Neurosis around 89, right? Did you have to move down there? Were you still in college? Like, when did that happen?
No, they were in Oakland. I was in San, it's an hour away. So no, I didn't move there. I didn't move. They were always in Oakland. We were always in Oakland as far as rehearsals. No, actually we had some rehearsal spaces in San Francisco after I lived there. But yeah, it was always, never a problem to commute, drive an hour.
Yeah.
It's a lot easier than, the commute became later after I moved to Idaho.
Neurosis, hugely influential band that everyone liked. Hardcore kids, metal kids, people who don't even know about this music. But what influence did you bring into it when you joined? What were you listening to? Like, what was your thing?
Well, we had really similar musical tastes. That's why it fit in. I was listening to a lot of Rudimentary Peni and the Amoebics, Crass, Killing Joke, Black Flag, Black Sabbath, early Pink Floyd. It's kind of a mix of throbbing gristle, a mix of industrial, goth, heavy, a lot of Joy Division, but always loving the huge guitars. And so when I joined, it was kind of like we were still trying to find out what our sound would be. I really loved the dissonant guitar chords of De Kreutzen from Wisconsin and Voivod from Canada, Quebec. And because they were both like, De Kreutzen came out of hardcore, Midwest hardcore, but quickly kind of put these more moody elements into their music, but with a really aggressive vocal style, yet still melodic somehow. And these crazy, what's the word I'm looking for? What's the opposite of harmony?
Dissonance?
Yeah, dissonant guitar chords, these crazy chords.
Yeah.
And so I started to try to make those kind of shapes. And I would hear that in Voivod as well, these crazy chords that you weren't hearing in most metal music of the day. And so I brought in my love for those chords, I think, and I also loved the way that they talked about their music and what it wanted to be. The soundtrack to the apocalypse. But we realized after I'm like, we talk about it wanting to be this, but it's really not. Like if you listen to that first record where I joined in time to write one song, The Word as Law on Lookout, it's a good record and it helped. Every piece of our past got us to where we would go next. But it was pretty obvious. It's like, you know what? We need to up our game as far as like huge guitar tones, the stuff we love about Discharge, Sabbath, what have you. We need to bring in a psychedelic element. So we need to have more tonal soundscapes available, maybe start to play with some effects. And, I think Public Enemy was actually a huge influence, not obviously musically, but man, if you wanted something to sound like a riot in the streets, that sounded like a riot in the streets. And while there were other kind of more industrial bands using sampling, they weren't using it like that, And I'm not talking about beats. I'm talking about air raid sirens. I'm talking about, the parts of the hardcore records, which were maybe intros or outros, of these strange sounds or screams or whatever. And like, you know what? Those can be instruments. Those can be playable on keys. You can move that sound onto a key, pitch it where you want it, flip it backwards, whatever sounds most intense. And that's another instrument, not just synthesizers and regular keyboards, but the sound of the world around us. If we want to sound like the human condition incarnate through your freaking ear holes, then it needs to be bombastic. We need to blow the doors wide open. And so we brought in another member with the ability with a sampler, and we dove in, and we instantly, it took us a couple records to get in the groove of it, but it, that's where we needed to go. We needed maximum emotion, maximum sonics, maximum dynamics.
What was the song you wrote on The Word as Law?
To What End?
Nice. So reading more about you, I saw you mention in another publication, a lot of life happened between 17 and 23. And you kind of mentioned that earlier in this conversation too. Neurosis went to the style more heard on Enemy of the Sun, but you also became more interested in poetry, philosophy, and spirituality. What prompted that increased interest in poetry, philosophy, and spirituality?
I have no idea. I think it was just natural curiosity. And if I look back to childhood, I think a certain aspect of me never stopped being, I have my moments, but never stopped having that sense of wonder and curiosity of the natural world, or of the unknown, or of the ideas or thoughts that you have when you're a kid, where it hasn't been trained out of you yet.
So you've always been like that? Yeah, because what just from reading about you and from the little bit we've spoken, you have this interest in nature, and you talk about gratitude, being grateful, which I like. I try to find something to be grateful for every day, because if I don't, well, I could easily go down a path of just being miserable all the time. But just, in the music, yeah, it's always an option. And in the music, there's a lot of spirituality. There's a lot of, it's just like a sense of nature and the imagery. So that's always been there.
Yeah, the older I get, the more I realize that, I don't know, the further I zoom in, like, it feels like I'm spiraling in towards the center, but simultaneously spiraling out towards the whole. It's interesting. Like the more I dial in, the more it zooms out, and the more I realize I've always been on this same path, and you just need to get far enough down it to be able to look back and see that it's been the same path the whole time. That everything's been leading to this place, but it's not a fixed path, and there's no fixed destination. It is really it's the path of being open, the path of like leaving your brain to be malleable, to still be allowed to have your mind change, to still be allowed to learn. I mean, a lot of guys my age, I'm turning 55, they've already got their world figured out in their mind, and become very narrow and closed-minded. Those don't tend to be the people I spend a lot of time with, but I see it, and I think that's a shame, because I still want to have my mind blown. I still want to have my best creative days ahead of me. I still want to have the best life ahead of me. I don't want to be looking back on some glory days, or nostalgia, or that type of thing to find joy. I want to be on the next project, on the next idea, on the next book. I want to keep expanding my mind and my heart and my experience.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm with you on that. I those are things I think about a lot, because my life has changed significantly several times over the years. And I think, like, what if I would have stayed in my hometown and got married? I would have been a lot more closed-minded, and I probably would have become a drunk, and like, it might not have been that good, but I've continually challenged myself, moved to a different city, throw myself off the cliff, climb back up, work on something new. And I can relate to a lot of what you're saying. And you talked about just kind of like tapping into this thing, right? And I've heard you mention that before in other interviews, like that creative flow, right? That creative voice, like, it's out there. You just need to listen and be ready to run with it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I don't know where all of this stuff comes from. I'm not. I don't consider myself gifted or talented enough to be the sole creator of the things that I feel I've been blessed to have flow through me. There is a talent to putting yourself in the right situations, and to giving yourself the space to listen, the space to hear. There's a discipline to putting in the time and the organization it takes to have projects be realized, because as much as on one aspect, I feel driven to make this, whether it's poetry or music or of any type for myself first. Obviously, I've always also felt a drive to put it out there and to put it in the world. And that takes, the creative aspect takes surrendering to the spirit of creativity and, not resting on your laurels, like you said about challenging yourself, like challenging to do new things. Like I don't ever want to make the same record twice. I don't want to ever linger in one level of achievement and accomplishment are kind of like the wrong words, because they I don't know, they feed into modern ideas about what success is. That's not what I mean, but just
Never settle.
Don't settle. Yeah, moving forward and take it somewhere else. Take it somewhere new. Again, I want to have my mind blown again. Whether it's as a music fan, as a reader, as a seeker, as a learner, and with myself and my own music. I want to be excited about what happens next.
I like that. I had my mind blown, Steve, when I was listening to your solo record, No Wilderness Deep Enough. And I read about how this record came to be, right? You listened to that creative voice and ran with it and did something you didn't expect to do. Tell that story.
Yeah. So, my wife is from Germany, and we were visiting her parents. Her family lives on a specific house site that they have lived on for over 500 years. They're just a farming family, and they've lived on this one spot. The house is built and rebuilt in one little spot for that long, which as Americans, we definitely can't imagine that type of timeline. But even for Europeans, like very few, even though they're used to older culture and older buildings, still they can't really relate to being on one house site, for 500 years. And so whenever we visit there, there's a weight and there's a depth. It's, I would almost say there's a beauty, and the weight almost has a sorrow to it. It's hard to explain. I think it just has something to do with the heaviness of one family being in one place so long. And on that particular trip, I had brought a small little keyboard with me and my laptop, and I was trying to teach myself a new recording software, and I couldn't sleep. As what happened when you go to Germany and you're staying with family, you're having rich food, you're eating the best bread and cheese you've ever had in your life, with great beer, and that combined with jet lag creates some pretty difficult sleep patterns. So
Yeah.
I was up, not able to sleep, and all right, well, I'll work on this. And my goal was to teach myself sampling in a new situation, because I was used to hardware samplers, and I never figured out how to make a sample on that trip in this program. But I stumbled upon this really natural sounding piano, a sampled piano instrument, and I just started playing these simple chords and recorded it, thinking nothing other than I was doing a test of how to use this program. And so each night, for a week, I was putting down these simple pianos, sometimes with a little mellotron chord progression or some simple synthesizers. But again, thought nothing of it. I'm just learning this program. Closed my computer, came home. A couple months later, I opened up some of those files, and I thought that they all were related to each other, and that they were all, even though they were incredibly simple, I'm not much of a piano player at all. These are 2 and 3 note chords with an occasional simple melody. But I think my limitations worked to my advantage, of that, even though they were simple, they were, just because of what I like to hear and my own preferences, they were harmonically complex. And they seem to suggest other layers. And so I did not know what I was creating, but I fired up my analog synthesizers here and some of my filters and effects and in my studio here that I'm sitting in right now. And I really just went down a rabbit hole, and it all fleshed out really naturally. And within a couple of months, I had this body of work that I really didn't know what it was, but I thought it was beautiful. It was psychedelic. It was piano based. Now there wasn't a guitar on that record. Synthesizer based. I had written a lot of string parts, which I was using synthesizer strings or mellotron strings for, and I really built it into what I thought was an interesting and pretty dramatic ambient record. And I didn't know what I would call it. I didn't know what its place was. Like, it didn't feel like my Harvestman project, which tends to be more analog synths and fuzz guitars, even though it doesn't really have any rules either. It seems to have something different about it. And it didn't feel like my solo work, because that had always started with guitar. And these were more like Coil meets Brian Eno meets Scandinavian minimalist neoclassical composers or something. It was this weird netherworld. I didn't know. So I thought, I'd like to book some time in a studio and put down a real piano, nicely recorded, and hire a cello player and a French horn player to replace my keyboard versions of those melodies with real ones. And I called my friend Randall Dunn, who had done A Life Unto Itself, my previous solo record. And he said, yeah, that's a great idea. We should totally do that. And you also should not be a wimp, and you should sing on that and make it your next solo record. And I argued against that pretty emphatically. I'm like, nope, definitely not. This beautiful music does not need my limited and harsh kind of croak ruining this beautiful music on top. But I respected his opinion. And by that point, we were coming up to my winter break. My wife went back to Germany to visit her folks for the holiday, for the Yule time. And so it was just me and the dogs at home. And I thought, okay, well, I don't agree with Randall, but I'm going to investigate that claim. So I put up a nice mic in my living room, and every morning I grabbed my journals with my poetry in it, and a pen, cup of coffee, approached the microphone, pushed play, and I started improvising. And by the end of that week, I had the lyrics nailed and I had the melodies nailed, and I had to call Randall back and said, well, you were right, and I've got it. So let's book time. And a few months later, when we were able to, by the end of that school year, I had met him in Portland, and spent 3 days recording the piano, re-recording the vocals. And he had done some work with a friend of his in New York who recorded the cello and the French horn, and we mixed it. And that kind of set the stage for what I'm doing now. Now I toured that in the U.S. I toured it in Europe, probably, almost 50 times I've played those songs now. And it's really changed my life incredibly to feel really inspired to sing on these beds of synthesizers and strings, and not have it guitar based. There's a certain element of Americana probably still in it, but it's not like the, old punk guy with a guitar trying to be Johnny Cash kind of deal.
Right.
It's taken on this different element, which has really opened my mind. And in fact, I just finished the new one, which will come out next year. And I took what I learned from that, which again was largely accidental, and that's now my roadmap. And I now did one that I think is even better, because I took what I learned by accident and I used those same processes with intent to begin with. And I'm really, I'm very grateful for that experience, and because it took a lot of things. It took overcoming my preconceived notions. I mean, I feel like I'm a pretty open-minded music maker, like I don't feel bound by a lot of limitations, but in many ways I am in my own way. And so this got me to confront that. It pulled me out as a singer in a different way. I had to own being a singer, which in turn helped me own being a poet, because the poetry book spun right off of that week that I wrote those lyrics. I had stolen. I didn't have any intention of ever sharing my poetry publicly, but I had what I thought was kind of a perfect poem on this page, and I stole the best line out of it because I needed a line in a song, and it was the right number of syllables. It had the right vowel sounds, like shit. I just ruined that perfectly good poem. And then, so that spun off to opening another doorway of, okay, well, maybe it can live a dual life. It can be a lyric and a song, and it can be a line in a poem. I can steal from myself. There's no law against that, right? So,
right.
And in fact, maybe these deserve to live a life outside of my journals if I spend the time to edit them and make them presentable. And that combined with just the confronting my kind of both that level of singing and that type of beautiful music and the poetry all required a lot of overcoming this kind of constant imposter syndrome, which I torture myself with. It doesn't stop me from doing things, because in some ways I've felt that way always. I just, again, thank the universe for punk rock, man, because punk rock is what, taught me you just need to mean it, and you just need to participate. It's not about being the best of the best. You just need to be authentic. You need to mean it. You need to have something to say, and you need to say it.
Yeah. Good thing you followed that creative stream, right? Imagine if you had gotten a good night of sleep that night. We might have missed out on a lot.
Absolutely. Yeah. Could have been a dark turn.
That's pretty amazing. I want to talk too about Harvestman. We have the Triptych series, and the second installment just came out. And you know what? Before we talk about that, what's the origin of Harvestman? How did it start? Because, it's different stylistically from your solo work.
Well, I've always had home studios. Since high school days, I always had a cassette 4-track back then. And so would always kind of play around with sounds. Even in school, I was doing some, analog tape cut-ups, but I didn't really ever do anything with them or follow it that far. It was just the interest, the seeds were planted. And in Neurosis in the mid 90s, I kind of brought those ideas, and my brothers bought into it, and they had similar ideas, and we just started experimenting with soundscapes and things outside of song structure, using whatever sound sources you had available, broken electronics, radios, any sort of acoustic sounds, strange sounds you can generate with things you already have, rhythms, percussion. And so basically, it must have been about, I don't know. I think it was was before I left California.
04, 05-ish?
Yeah, I think the few years before that, I had just been kind of amassing a lot of strange recordings. And some of it dates back probably even to the late 90s, that didn't seem to have a home. They weren't part of what we were doing in Neurosis. They weren't part of my songwriter aspect that I was exploring at the time. They seemed to be sort of a nod to home recorded lo-fi psychedelia, using whatever tools you have. They seem to kind of reference this in some ways. Another term I've heard is a rural psychedelia. You're thinking of landscape and utilizing electric guitars and synthesizers, and it kind of became a catch-all for all the other things I wasn't able to express with Neurosis, Tribes, and Neurot and my solo stuff. So it was, contemplating folklore, meditating on ancient megalithic sites and stone sites, ancient European art, but through the lens of Tangerine Dream style synthesizers or krautrock style motoric rhythms, or whacked out fuzz guitars of Hawkwind or a strange sense of reverb space and processing reverb is like Flying Saucer Attack and things like that. So it's really just kind of like taking all my like random bits of sonic love and interests and somehow forging it into some sort of musical thing that made some sort of sense, like British ballads, the folk music of England, Ireland, and Scotland as well, like was something I was interested in, but I'm never going to become a player of that type of music. I'm not that level of musician, and those kind of require a time and a dedication, and a learning period. So this is just kind of my way of throwing it all out there and in some sort of sonic homage and appreciation to all of those things, while at the same time, like taking also what I love about dub music, which in my current records, I'm using that idea a little more literally. But the idea I originally took from my love of dub music was the studio is the instrument and the mix is the performance. It's different than other types of recording where, you want to capture that band playing that song that way at that time and represent it purely. Whereas a dub thing is like, doesn't matter what's on the tape. You're turning it into something new. You're running it through filters. You're running it through effects. You're muting stuff, unmuting stuff, and playing with the delays, playing them off each other, and so using those types of, the fun aspect of sitting at a mixing desk, the sound is fun,
Yeah.
and I love playing with it, feeding things back on themselves. So it's really just, again, it's a catch-all for all of that stuff. And somehow I gave it a structure that made sense to me and seems to resonate with some other folks as well.
Yeah, I think that's the key, right? Because anyone can combine styles, anyone can put things together. Well, almost anyone. But I think the key is, what is it you're putting together? How does it fit together cohesively? And when you describe the ancient folklore and all of that stuff you're interested in mixed with the guitar-driven rock and that type of thing, it's a really interesting combination.
It seems like it shouldn't work.
Yeah. So the Triptych series, I read each of the 3 installments are coordinated for release on specifically chosen full moons this year. This sounds like a very you idea. How did you come up with that? And what's like the overall theme behind the Triptych series?
It's painfully obvious. It's 3. It's threes. Everything's in threes. It started with the kind of recognition, and I saw it again. It didn't reveal itself until far along in the process. I was just amassing songs, and I started to look at it, go, I wonder if I got enough stuff sitting around for a record, and there were 3 songs I sent primitive versions of to my friend Al Cisneros from Ohm and from Sleep to put some bass tracks on, because he had done that on an earlier record, and he said, if you ever want more, do it. And so I had those 3 songs. I always knew I would dub those because he and I both like dub, and his bass lines lend themselves to dub. So that's 3, and that's 3 again. I had destroyed accidentally a big metal stock tank, a big metal water tank, for livestock that we have on the property that we just keep full for like the deer and the moose. Out in the property, and I had hit it with my snowplow. I got a 1990 Chevy Suburban with a really big snowplow, and if you hit something, unless it's a rock that will stop your car, you don't really feel it. So
yeah,
it was buried in snow. I didn't realize I had punctured the side of this thing until the snow melted in April. And as I was rolling this big stock tank down to my truck to take it to the dump, I realized it sounded incredible. So I kept it. And during the pandemic, my friend Dave French, who toured with Neurosis for years on the crew, he also played drums in Brothers of the Sonic Cloth. He's also the current drummer of Yob. He stayed with us for a little over a year, and we composed 3 pieces on that. Whereas that was the primary track, was us finding rhythms and interesting sounds in this big old rusty metal broken tank. So that's another 3. There were 3 songs that ended up having archival recordings of poets on them. There were 3 songs that had been sitting around since I used to use a 1/2-inch 8-track reel-to-reel back in San Jose for over 20 years that had been kind of just waiting to find their place. There were 3 tracks that I recorded of my friend John Goff, a bagpiper, that I love to manipulate and destroy and fragment and process his bagpipes into something else, which I'd also done before. But again, it all just kind of, and then there were 3 that didn't fit. So there were 3 kind of homeless tracks. So everything, it wound up to be, 7 groups of 3. And so that's when I realized, okay, well, this obviously isn't one record. This is 3 records, which as the record label owner, I really dislike what me, the artist, has presented. It's expensive.
Why is that? Oh, expensive.
Yep. Drains the account pretty quick. You put that many records into production.
Yeah.
And then, finding the right artist for it this time around, Henry Hoblock, who I didn't know. I'd been following his art and really liking it because he does these kind of risograph style prints of these megaliths which don't exist. He kind of his own mythology. And I reached out to him and he was game and just developed the perfect artistic sequence for it. I don't know. It kind of all just fell into place. It's a lot of work. It's not completely magical. But it is allowing oneself to kind of follow some sort of natural flow, like the music does seem to be asking something of me. And I try to listen. And the 3 Moons was, I needed to find 3 related dates. It had to be 3. And since it was 3, I wasn't going to use equinoxes or solstices because it seemed like you can only do those in pairs or 4s. So I could divide the year equally in thirds if I used moons, if I used a lunar calendar. So I picked the 3 that made sense with when we wanted to release them.
You seem pretty tapped into the creative force field, and I like that. Isn't it the best? Like, it's happened to me where a great song comes out of nowhere, a lyric comes out of nowhere, something comes to you in a dream, inspiration strikes you out of nowhere. I want to dig into that more.
Yeah, it's, there's really no one place. I mean, sometimes I come out and I've set aside some time to be creative and, nothing happens. And it's kind of a bummer because I don't have, as you can guess from all the things I'm involved with, a full-time job and, family and running a record label and multiple projects and just life. Like the least amount of time I have is creative time out in the studio. Like those are like the little bits. Those are the precious moments, So I try to make them count. I try to not waste time if I can. So, you can try to force it and it might not work out. You can't ever tell when it could be. I could be walking the dogs. In fact, one of the songs on my upcoming solo record, it really came pretty formed over a couple of mornings after the initial melody and the words started to come just while walking the dogs around the property. And there were certain like pieces of the property that indicated, a certain tree, a certain rock, a certain patch of soil covered in moss that became part of the lyrics and also became the reminder of what the melody was. Other times it could be, coming out of a dream state or, those driving in the car, you never know. Sitting in my classroom, like at lunch, my kids are out at recess at lunch and I've got a guitar sitting there and something comes, and, or like that, the nights in Germany where it just came. It just like this, it felt like the spirits of the land were moving my hands. And so I think it really is just, I have a piano in my living room where I'm not set up to record or anything. And we have a nice sound. It's a nice sounding room. It has really high ceilings. And sometimes it's just the instrument itself feels like it contains music, you know? You have one guitar in your hand and you switch to a different one. It has something else it wants to say. Sometimes putting a bass in my hands, even though I'm not a bass player, will bring something else out, you know? An acoustic versus an electric brings out a different style of playing, which makes my hands do different things. Plugging in synthesizers makes different things happen. So it really does happen a lot of different ways. I think I really just try to put myself in front of situations that provide the opportunity for a lot of happy accidents.
As the label owner, did you try to talk yourself out of the 3 LP release?
100%, yeah.
And maybe try to get it down to 2?
Yeah, I tried to get myself down to 1, but I was arguing with myself, so I lost.
Neurot Recordings, your label. What does it look like today? You said you have space on your property where you do work for the label?
Yeah, we have a barn. It's a part of it is just like what you need, like garage and tools type things. That's about a quarter of it. About half of it is like warehouse full of vinyl and CDs. Some family storage up in one corner, and then we have an office. My studio takes up about a quarter, and our office takes up about a quarter, and they're like freestanding rooms within the barn built because it's a metal barn in a cold environment. So we had to make them sound and insulated. It's be careful what you ask for, because when I was a teenager and I wanted a punk rock record label, well, I got one, and it's a lot of responsibility because it's not just my own music, it's other people's music as well. And you have to make sure that, financially, we barely stay afloat. It really is a labor of love. We can only afford one person to come work here part-time to keep things moving. And she does a great job of being the production manager and taking care of the day-to-day while I'm at school, at work. We outsource our mail order. We did used to run it from here, but it's just not, you can't find good enough help. And running a shopping cart system and dealing with customer service was just too much.
Right.
To run out of the barn here. So we outsourced that to the people that were printing our shirts, which made total sense anyway. And we hire out for PR, and we have a buddy in New York that has been in the music industry ever since he was an intern in California and just came and volunteered time to us. And he helps us with our royalty accounting. And, you have to be on it. We account on time accurately twice a year, and it's a lot of work. We put out a lot of weird music, and most of it does not even break even. So it's a real struggle to try to guess how many of things depress. And it's not, it was a little easier to survive when CDs were the currency, because even though I love vinyl and I'm a vinyl nut, I have 2 turntables in the house and one in the office, and that's my preferred method of listening. CDs were a better profit margin for small labels. They cost under $2 and you get paid $7, whereas
right.
LPs, cost $8 and you get back 11.
And you have to wait like 6 months to get them sometimes.
Yeah, I mean that's a little bit better these days, and but yeah, it's a different deal, and we do it for the love, and yeah, it's definitely tough to survive, but we're squeaking by.
Are you on the phone with bands, like working through stuff, or do other people handle that?
Oh, what do you mean working through stuff?
Like, do bands call you like, hey, I need those shirts, or hey, is this artwork ready? Like that kind of stuff?
Suzanne takes care of the production management with the record itself. I more deal with the bigger issues of, do we want to put out their record and what have you, and, timelines, and do we want to put out the next one, and, kind of the general stuff. And then I can hand it off. But yeah, we don't handle a whole lot of bands merch. We basically just do the records. Occasionally we'll do a t-shirt for the release or something, but yeah, we try to keep it all realistic and something that we can handle, and not make promises we can't keep. And, it's people have strange ideas of what record labels can handle, or what even a band like Neurosis or like a a known person like myself, like what we might be able to make happen. And to be honest, we struggle to sell hundreds of things.
Really? See, I figure you would be able to do anything.
Yeah, that part I haven't figured out. I know how to spend money really well. I know how to stay true to my mid '80s punk rock ethics of do it yourself. And the thing I like to say most often now is some people save up their money all year and they take their family to Hawaii. I save up my money all year from my poorly paid teacher salary to go lose it on tour. Or lose it going to a studio that I can't really afford for a solo record. But you know what? That's what I want to do. And I wouldn't change a single thing about it. Those are life experiences. It's what I love. It's what I enjoy. And, I'm not going to cry about, having to eat a couple $1,000 to go play 25 cities in Europe in beautiful places for beautiful people that want to be there. It's fucking great. Most people don't get to say that.
I'm with you on that. I don't get all of my joy from going on vacation. I don't take vacations. I don't socialize a ton. I love to work. I love to create things. I love to put them out there. And I will go into debt to tour if I can, because that's what I want to do. I'm with you.
100%.
Yeah.
I'd rather make it break even, but
Yeah. But even if I have to spend the money, that's fine. When did you meet your wife? How long have you been together?
We've been married 12 years, and we've known each other for 15.
Mm-hmm.
We met. It was a Facebook romance.
Oh yeah.
Yep. Met on Facebook. I had caught a fish up here in a lake with a dear friend of mine, and being into old European folklore, there's a lot of famous folk tales about magic fish and what happens after. So I posted a picture of catching it. I was new to social media. I didn't know what I was using it for. I didn't know if it was genuine communication with people I knew or if it was promoting music or some sort of combination thereof. I had a real dysfunctional relationship with it. I didn't know who I should accept as friends or any of that type of thing. It was trying to figure out what is this and what am I using it for? And a person had commented about the fish and that it looked similar to type of fish that person had caught up while fishing in Sweden. And I don't know. I just started talking with this person, and over time, the year before that, I had had a divorce from my first marriage, and I was raising my kids here. So I wasn't, necessarily looking for something to complicate life anymore than raising kids, running a record label, and working full time and being in bands. But we just, I don't know. It's hard to explain. Those conversations quickly became deep and about life. And, I fell in love with this person before ever having physically met, over the period of many months, and, organized a solo tour to Europe specifically so I could go meet her in Germany. And, we did a couple of years of back and forth, up and down, going through the struggles of navigating a relationship and if it would work or not. And then at some point, in order for the relationship to go any further, it was going to require one of us to move. And since I had kids, that put it on her. And, she, with a huge amount of courage and, some heartbreak back home, left her life as she knew it for, the middle of nowhere in Idaho for love.
It's a beautiful thing.
It is a beautiful thing. And yeah, and my daughters fell in love with her as well, and call her their bonus mom, and and if all works out, hopefully we'll ride this life out into the sunset.
Yeah. I like that idea of a partnership where you can still do the things you want to do, right? And there must be support if you're married and living together, because I don't know, there's been times where I'm in relationships and it's like the other person is like, well, you need to give up basically everything that makes you happy. And I'm like, well, I don't want to.
I don't understand how people can do that to each other. Like, why would you want to control another human being on any level? It's the most
Yeah.
wicked. I see it so much in relationships where people try to exercise power, and maybe they have life experiences that make them feel the need to try to control what they can.
Mm-hmm.
But really, all of us need to realize, and I'm sure all of us have our moments where we're trying to control things outside of ourselves, but really that's the only control we do have,
Right.
is maybe not even over our own emotions or feelings or anything else, but we only have control over our own reactions to how we react to
Yes.
the world around us. And it seems like to find where our dreams overlap with people enough to want to have a friendship or a relationship or work together, that's incredible. And I wouldn't, yeah, you hear so many stories, like kind of like what you just mentioned of, oh, yeah, I had a band and then I had kids and got married. Like, when has that ever stopped anybody who really wanted to do it? You
Yeah.
know, famous
Yeah.
artists and musicians have marriages and children, you know? If you're Willie Nelson and you're gone every single day of your life on tour, then you might go through a few more marriages than other folks. but 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 yeah, I think, like if you have to give up things that you love because someone else demands it of you, that's just going to lead to resentment and what ifs and all kinds of other things. It seems more likely oh, you just have to become better at your time management and make sure that you give the relationship the time it needs, and that you give your art the time it needs, and you give your kids the time. Like, it for me, like having those kids and other responsibilities like that, it obviously hasn't slowed me down. It just crystallized my desire and my passion to do these things, and I will not give them up. I just have to become very efficient at managing these things.
Yes. That's it exactly. See, I want to do it all like you're doing. And I want to be in a partnership where she's doing her thing and I support her, and I'm doing my thing and she's supporting me. No one's trying to get each other to stop doing anything that we're passionate about that's healthy, right? It's got to be out there. It has to be.
Yep, it does.
Yeah. Neurosis. We know Neurosis is on hiatus, and we know there's more important things going on than bands, but I'm curious if there's any update or any news on the future of the band.
No, we experienced a very difficult situation, and had to just had a few years where we couldn't even deal with it because of the circumstances. And then once we were finally able to say it by circumstances, finally given permission, to express where we were at, then it was kind of like a big reliving the sorrows we had already been processing all over again. And so really just had to kind of walk away from that biggest heartbreak that we've ever experienced, and try to get some perspective. And so all I can really say is time will reveal what's supposed to happen.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I hope everyone is doing okay as they can, and I hope that you and everyone else find some semblance of peace. But like you said, time will tell, right?
100%.
Right. So let's remind people about what's going on. We've got Harvestman, the Triptych series of LPs. Part 2 just came out, and Part 3 is going to come out whenever the next full moon is. When is that?
In October, not the next full moon, but it comes out the Hunter's Moon in October.
Ah, the Hunter's Moon.
Yeah.
So it's not. Is it not full moons, or is it Hunter's moons?
They're full moons. Yeah, it was the pink moon, the buck moon, and the Hunter's Moon.
Oh, I see.
Which are just the names that certain belief systems give, mostly Native American names for the moons, dealing with what's happening in the seasonally at those times. And so I believe it will be on October 17th.
I'm looking forward to that. And look, you've got a lot of music out there, the solo records.
Yeah, next one's coming out probably early 2025. I mean, it's done, it's mixed. Working on artwork right now. Super excited about that.
Yeah, I'm very excited to hear that based on what you described, because I was really blown away by No Wilderness Deep Enough.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I think this goes farther, and it feels to me even more emotional. So, yeah. I hope you'll like it when you get a chance to hear it next year.
I don't see any circumstance in which I wouldn't. They're more emotional. I like
Never
that.
know.
By the, you know what? One more question. How did you get into ambient and like soundscapes and all that kind of stuff? It's newer territory for me, but I like it. The band Hammock. Have you ever heard them? They got me into a lot of ambient. I
Yeah,
really love.
I discovered them by accident thanks to the algorithm. The ambient music. I made myself a playlist that had Stars of the Lid and Brian Eno and Biosphere and a lot of records that I do, Alluvium, and my playlist ran out and it fed me a track and I was like, what is this? This is incredible.
It's unbelievably good.
And that came up. And so that's I have some mixtapes. Actually, they're just Spotify playlists, but I prefer to think of them as mixtapes that I've made, and they play pretty heavily on my ambient playlist. So how I got into that, I'm part of it. I think is just playing with sound, and I must have been talking about it with friends in high school. I had a friend in high school who was more of like a progressive rock kind of keyboard guy. We didn't really see eye to eye musically at that time because I just wanted things as fast and as hardcore as they could be. And he was listening to Yes. But he did bring in a Tangerine Dream record one time because the music teacher would let me set up an amp and a guitar in a little sound booth and just practice during and get a credit for it during music time. And there was a turntable in there, and I played that Tangerine Dream record. It was so trippy. I was really kind of blown away. I didn't know people made just atmospheric music like that. And also, I'll credit radio for it as well, because there was a local station, KFJC, which was a community radio station. They're still there. It's where I first heard a lot of interesting things like Scandinavian folk music. It's where I first heard Coil and Throbbing Gristle, which I thought I knew scary music until I heard Throbbing Gristle. I was like, holy shit, I don't know anything about scary music. This is truly terrifying. But they also had some ambient music playing there. And there was another radio station across the bay, I think it was KPFA, which hosted the Maximum Rock and Roll radio show and also hosted Negative Land's show, which was kind of also mind expanding. If you've never gone on a deep dive about Negative Land, you should. There's some incredible documentaries right now on YouTube about them. But they also had this program called Hearts of Space, which actually might have been on even just regular kind of like whatever the NPR station was, but like Sunday night at 11 p.m. would be this strange space music. It was called Hearts of Space. That's where I first heard things like Steve Roach and Robert Rich, who were, because I'd heard new age music and that was a little less appealing because it just felt fluffy.
Yeah.
And like there wasn't a depth to it, but this like Hearts of Space was a little bit more cosmic, a little deeper. It had some moments of darkness and moments of light. And the same with that Tangerine Dream record. And so I think just all of these things together, kind of like in life, I feel like everything I've ever been interested in is having a conversation with itself, with all the other things. And the conversations get just a little more refined over time, like it feels like all the random things people are feeding me right now seems to relate. Like maybe I've read too much about synchronicity or had too much Robert Anton Wilson books when I was younger, but it just, all of the things seem related. It's all connected.
It's true. It's true. Yeah, I remember hearing at the end of the movie Heat, they play a Moby song called God Moving Over the Face of the Waters. I remember being really moved by that. And at the end of the movie Traffic, they play Brian Eno, An Ascent, I think it's called.
From the Apollo record.
Yeah, and that was like unbelievably moving. So eventually when I found Hammock and found more ambient music, I'm like, oh, there's artists who like do this. So I always have it on when I'm working because it can just be on and I won't get too sucked in. I love it.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
Okay, well, listen, Steve, I appreciate you. Many people appreciate you. You're doing so many great things, and it sounds like there's a lot more coming. And I'm happy about that. So I just want to say thank you for taking the time to come on the show.
And thank you for taking the time to do it, Keith. It's also all about, like the label work or like your podcast. It takes people doing the work on the back end too, to promote culture and to promote the good things that our species do, to counteract the other things we could be focused on.
And there you have it, Steve Von Till. And what a great conversation that was. In addition to Neurosis, who have been hugely influential to so many people, he's done a lot. It was really interesting to hear about his creative process and how all the different things he's into, or the different things he learned at college, like the audio and video stuff, how it makes its way into his music. And I like that he's a teacher, too. Imagine you're in grade school and Steve Von Till is your teacher. I bet he's a great teacher, too. He's got a lot of wisdom, a lot of insight, and he makes a lot of great music. Harvestman, great stuff. I love his solo records. By the way, part 3 of the Harvestman Triptych series comes out next month. The first 2 records are out there now, and a new single from part 3 was just released. It's called Clouds Are Relatives. So check that out. And if you're interested in picking up any Harvestman vinyl or merch, head to neurorecordings.merchtable.com. And thank you so much, Steve, for coming on the show. Really great conversation. So let's check in. How are we doing? I'm doing fine. Things have winded down since the memory entry show with This Day Forward. So I've been taking some time to work out more because I fell off in August, but now I'm back and I'm back to doing it 3 times a week, and I feel good. There's some things around the house that had to be taken care of that I've been putting off, so I'm taking care of that. There was major construction in my apartment for a week right after the show, so that disrupted things, but that's done now. Everything is good. I've got everything fixed up here. And I just needed to take some time by myself because, a lot of people, a lot of band practice, a lot of things to do. So I'm just chilling out, getting myself straight here. And I've done that enough. So now I'm ready to get back to work. So I will be working on some new songs and hopefully booking some more shows. And I forget if I did an official announcement the other week, but my new band, Memory Entry, has officially been announced. The first single is out there. It's called Crawler. That's the first song we ever wrote. And there will be a vinyl release coming in 2025, early 2025, I think. And that will be a joint effort between Mind Over Matter Records and Iodine Recordings. So more news on the vinyl soon, but I just want to thank Austin from Mind Over Matter and Casey from Iodine Recordings for everything they've done for the band so far. The art and the photos and the releasing the song and helping get it mastered, everything. All the things that record labels do, and everything looks great and sounds great so far. So thank you, and I'm looking forward to everybody hearing the full release. So yeah, I'm going to work on writing new music, and I want to book a East Coast run to coincide with the vinyl release. So we'll see how it goes. But otherwise, everything is good. Things here are pretty quiet. We're moving into fall, which is my favorite time of the year. So I feel good. And I hope everybody out there is doing well as well. So we have a new Apple Podcast review, and it is from Maybe Matt. Matt says, "Great podcast, 5 stars. Keep on doing what you do. Thank you." And thank you, Matt, for the review. So everyone, please follow in Matt's footsteps here and rate the show 5 stars on Apple Podcasts. We're at 253 reviews. We've got to get to 300. One way or another, somehow, we've got to do it. If you listen to the show on an iPhone and you haven't rated us yet, there's a podcast app on the phone. Open that up. Search The New Scene. click on it, scroll down a bit, and you'll see the rating system. Hit the 5-star button, and you can write a review too. And if you write a review, I'll read it here in the end part of the show. So that's it. That's everything we've got this week. We've got more incredible interviews coming up in September, so we have that to look forward to. And I'm going to end the show with a track from Steve Von Till's 2020 solo record called No Wilderness Deep Enough. I really enjoyed this record, and I was happy to hear Steve say that, he's got a new solo record coming out, and it'll be in this vein. So I'm looking forward to that. The song that we are ending the show with is called The Old Straight Track. So I'll add that and Harvestman and some other stuff to the New Scene 2024 Spotify playlist. Make sure you go follow that. It's a great place to check out all of the music associated with the show for this year. And I have a playlist for every year the podcast has been active, so you can go back and check out everything. I'm back next week, and I'll see you then.